Yep. We back again. Aswand Cruickshank, checking in. Your one and only Move Swiftly speaker, checking in for another a daily Move Swiftly thought, giving you a perspective on teamwork that you will not get anywhere else. Happy Friday, folks. Here we go. It's football season. It's itching. That itch always starts to come. We're approaching that mid-July, and I got to scratch that itch, all right? It was my junior year of high school. I'll never forget this day, this week, just the overall, just so many different storylines going into this week, all right? I played for Good Counsel High School, and there was this huge mountain we had to climb, all right? There was this rivalry we had with a team named the DeMatha Stags, all right? My first ever start, the first time I ever started on a varsity football field was against the almighty DeMatha Stags, the place Chase Young played, the place where the Rodney McLeod, countless NFL players have come from, all right? And that was my first start. And the year was 2005. I was a junior, so it was 2005, almost 20 years ago now. And I will never, oh my God, look at that sunset. Let's just take time to look at that sunset. Wow, okay. I will never forget this week. I got the word at the beginning of the week, hey, Wani, that's what they called me back in high school. You're starting this week, your first ever start. My first ever start. And my stomach was like in knots. I was a nervous wreck all week because of the storylines, because of everything that I had seen up to that point. You got to understand, all right? On the other side of that field, on that DeMatha team, there were three players that really played a huge role in my youth development, my development into becoming the kind of man, the kind of guy I am today, all right? First, guy named Kenny Tate. Kenny Tate, I played against when I was still a Brick Cheney White Oak Warrior. He was on the Peppermill Pirates, which was a huge rivalry. But we played him against when we played that year that we beat them. Actually, no, they beat us. So they beat us the regular season because he played, and then in the playoffs he didn't play. He got hurt in practice, and we ended up actually winning that game. That game that he didn't play was the game that my coach at the time, Coach Art, had passed away on the field. Died as a massive heart attack. And the way that Coach Art would talk about Kenny Tate was like he was like the second coming of Jim Brown. Like he's damn good. And it was said that had he played that playoff game, there's no way we would have beat them. So again, Kenny Tate, that for this DeMatha game, fast forward to this DeMatha game, his ankle was all healed up and he balled. He did his thing. Second player was a guy named Surly Monzi, who was actually my teammate on the White Oak Warriors. And it was, anybody who was around during that time, was into football during that time, knows the name Surly Monzi, and it was like a bidding war. It's like a bidding war to get him, to the point where I got to Good Counsel, and if you really would have asked anybody that played for White Oak, or anybody that was just around football, just knew the football world, they would have expected, if there was a White Oak Warrior that was starting at that game, that was going to be the first team, WCAC, all the accolades that I got, it was supposed to be Surly, not Aswand Cruickshank. No one would have said Aswand Cruickshank would have accomplished the things that he did in high school. They would have said Surly Monzi is going to be that guy that takes over and does all these great things. Surly didn't even play that game. He didn't even start a high school game. That's a story within itself. But anyway, the third player was a guy named Benji Clements. Benji, who was actually ended up being the running back during that game. He ended up being a teammate of mine when I got to Stony Brook University. He was one of two. He and I were the only two actual WCAC players on the Big South Championship team when we first beat Liberty and all that stuff. So the storylines were crazy, all right? The storylines were crazy. Long story short, the storylines were absolutely crazy. And this is my first start. I'm a nervous wreck. I remember actually, here's what got me through it. Let me just get to the point. It was during the walkthrough that Saturday morning, right? And arguably the best defensive lineman that has come out of Good Counsel, his name is Nick Jenkins. He ended up playing at the University of Virginia. In fact, the pipeline that you see between the University of Virginia and Good Counsel, Nick Jenkins was the one who kind of started that, all right? So Nick looks at me during walkthroughs, and he was a defensive lineman. Like I mentioned, I was the linebacker. He looks at me during the walkthrough. He looks back at me. He goes, nervous? And I'm like, you have no fucking, I am fucking. And he tells me, this is what he did to kind of calm me down. He goes, this is my third year in a row starting against the Matha, and I'm nervous. So I know you're nervous, all right? So we get to the locker room. We get to the school. We actually played them at Parkdale High School. And by the time we got to the locker room, pads were up, everything was rolling. Coach Malloy gave us his speech. In fact, Coach Malloy's speech, I'll never forget when Coach Malloy talked to us, his knees were like buckling and shaking, like, because it was that big of a game. The atmosphere was like that of a college environment. So we get to the locker room, it's quiet. Right before we're about to go in, Nick Jenkins pulls us all in, and we're just juniors, so we're not necessarily the leaders of the team yet. Me and him, we became co-captains our senior year, but this is before all of that happened. And he brings us all into the locker room, our junior, and this is when we stepped up. This is when we really, really felt that moment. He brings us all in and he goes, 48 minutes of fucking war! Who's coming with me? Woo! Let me tell you, to the point where I will never forget that moment. To the point where just a few months ago, I did a workshop at a very prestigious school named the St. Thomas Aquinas Raiders out here in South Florida, in front of 70 different coaches and the speaking. All the speaking I do now, I still do get nervous, and I go back to that moment. I go back to him telling us 48 minutes of fucking war. He did every single day, 48 minutes. That line, 48 minutes for the next 48 years of your life. Listen to me. When you play this game, it's all about the moments. Not about the wins and losses. Not about your stats. Not about your accolades. Not about all the first team, 3-team, whatever All-American you think you're, however good you think you are. It's about those moments that you share with the men in the locker room, and you will never forget them. Never. Woo! All right. I see I went way over my time, but hey, listen, if you want to dive deeper into my world, check out the Move Swiftly podcast. I take a deep, deep dive into all of these topics. Go to makeyourmove.com, purchase a few copies of my book. Aswand Cruickshank, checking out your one and only Move Swiftly speaker. You guys continue to move swiftly. Happy Friday. We will talk more soon.